The massive alien ship appeared in Earth's orbit without warning. It hung silently above the blue planet, its smooth silver surface reflecting sunlight. Around the world, people looked up at the sky with fear and wonder. 6 hours later, a small team of humans sat in a large, oddly shaped room aboard the alien vessel. The air smelled strange, like cinnamon and metal. The gravity felt slightly off. Ambassador Heather Martinez smoothed her dark blue suit and tried to look confident. Next to her, Major Frank Powell sat straight-backed in his crisp military uniform, watching the aliens with careful eyes. "Welcome to the Galactic Confederation," said the tallest alien. Its skin was pale blue with faint patterns that shifted like clouds. "I am High Counselor Vrex. We represent 873 spacefaring species who live together in peace." Heather nodded politely. "Earth is honored by your visit. We hope to learn from your advanced civilization." Another alien stepped forward. This one had 4 arms and skin that looked like polished wood. "We have studied your planet from afar. We are concerned." "Concerned?" Frank asked, his voice steady. "About what?" "Your world is what we classify as a death world," the wooden alien said. "The gravity is crushing. The atmospheric pressure is intense. Your temperature variations are extreme. The radiation levels from your sun are severe. The fact that life exists at all on your planet is remarkable." Heather and Frank exchanged confused glances. A third alien, tall and elegant with silvery skin, joined the conversation. "I am Zith of the Solarian Council. What my colleague means is that your species has evolved in conditions that would kill most Confederation citizens instantly." "Our world seems perfectly normal to us," Heather said. "Precisely," Zith replied. "And that is both fascinating and concerning. Before any new species joins the Confederation, we must evaluate their capabilities and temperament." Frank leaned forward. "You want to test us?" "Yes," said High Counselor Vrex. "We propose you attempt the Defiance course." "What's that?" Heather asked. The wooden alien touched a device on its wrist. A hologram appeared in the center of the room, showing a massive space station shaped like a twisted figure 8. "The Defiance course is our most challenging test of species capability," Vrex explained. "It measures physical endurance, mental computation, and psychological resilience. No species has ever completed it in less than 94 standard cycles." "Cycles?" Frank asked. "Approximately 1 Earth year," Zith clarified. "The course typically requires about 100 of your years to complete." Heather frowned. "That's longer than a human lifetime." "Yes," Vrex nodded. "Most species send generations of participants. The knowledge and adaptation are passed down. We would give your species the standard 100-year grace period to attempt completion." Frank stood up suddenly. "What exactly does this course involve? What are the parameters?" The alien seemed surprised by his direct question. Zith touched a different device, and detailed specifications appeared in the hologram. "These are the conditions and challenges. As you can see, they begin at difficulty level appropriate for standard Confederation physiology and increase progressively to the very limits of biological adaptation." Frank studied the hologram carefully. After a few minutes, he looked at the aliens with a strange expression. "We'll do it." "Excellent," Vrex said. "Your species has 100 years to prepare and—" "No," Frank interrupted. "We'll do it now. Today." The room fell completely silent. The aliens stared at the humans with expressions that even across species barriers clearly showed shock. "That's not possible," the wooden alien finally said. "The course requires decades of adaptation and training." Frank shrugged. "Maybe for you, but looking at these specifications, I think we can handle it. Ambassador Martinez, with your permission, I'd like to assemble a small team." Heather looked uncertain, but nodded. "If Major Powell thinks it's possible, I trust his judgment." High Counselor Vrex's skin pattern swirled rapidly. "This is unprecedented, but if you insist, We will transport you to Station Perplexus immediately. Though I must warn you, attempting all phases without proper preparation could be distressing." Frank smiled slightly. "We're from Earth, Counselor. We're used to distressing conditions." The aliens exchanged worried glances as Frank stepped away to make a call to Earth. None of them noticed the small smile that had appeared on Zith's face, a smile that looked almost like anticipation. 6 hours later, a small human team stood in the central chamber of Station Perplexus. The massive space station hummed with strange energy. Curved walls glowed with soft blue light. Aliens of various shapes and sizes moved around them, whispering and pointing. Major Frank Powell had assembled his team quickly. Next to him stood Dr. Olivia Johnson, a brilliant xenobiologist with curly red hair and quick eyes. Engineer Alan Garcia was busy examining the alien technology around them, his hands itching to take things apart. Specialist Nicole Roberts stood slightly apart, her military posture matching Powell's, her dark skin contrasting with her white uniform. A multi-limbed insectoid alien approached them. Its body was covered in shiny green plates, and its 6 eyes blinked independently of each other. "I am Administrator Zilthrop," it said through a translation device. "Welcome to the Defiance course. In all my 230 cycles, I have never seen a species attempt the course without preparation. We like to dive right in," Frank said with a slight smile. Zilthrop's mandibles clicked. "As you wish. The course has 3 phases: physical endurance, mental computation, and psychological resilience. Each phase typically requires 33 of your Earth years to master." The administrator led them to a large viewing window. Beyond it was a massive chamber that seemed to shift and change as they watched. The course adapts to each species based on their homeworld parameters. For Deathworlders like yourselves, we must increase the difficulty substantially. Dr. Johnson stepped forward. "May I see the specific parameters you are using?" Zilthrop handed her a transparent tablet. Olivia studied it, her eyebrows rising higher with each swipe of her finger. "Is something wrong?" Alan asked quietly. "Not exactly," she whispered back. "Their idea of extreme conditions is interesting." Nicole moved closer. "Meaning?" "The gravity they consider crushing is about 1.8 times Earth normal. The extreme temperature variations range from what we call a mild winter to a warm summer day. The atmospheric toxins they're so worried about are comparable to downtown Los Angeles on a smoggy day." Frank nodded slowly. "So what they consider a century-long adaptation process is basically Tuesday on Earth," Olivia finished. By now, a crowd of aliens had gathered in the observation deck above. Representatives from dozens of species watched with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Ambassador Martinez stood among them, trying to maintain diplomatic calm. Zilthrop guided the humans to a preparation room lined with strange equipment. "You may choose protective gear for the physical endurance phase. Most species require decades of gradual exposure before completing this phase." Alan examined the gear and shook his head. "This would just slow us down." "Are you certain?" Zilthrop's voice carried genuine concern. "The conditions are calibrated to your physiology. They will be extremely challenging." Frank looked at his team. They all nodded. "We're ready to proceed as we are." The insectoid seemed troubled, but led them to the entrance of the first phase. A massive door slid open, revealing a harsh landscape. Wind howled. The ground shook occasionally. The air shimmered with what the aliens considered dangerous toxins. "The goal is to cross the terrain and reach the marker at the far side," Zilthrop explained. "Most species establish base camps and advance over many years. You may retreat at any time if the conditions become unbearable." Nicole stepped forward first, taking a deep breath of the supposedly toxic air. "Smells like New Jersey," she said with a small smile. Frank nodded to his team. "Stay together. Communicate clearly. Let's show them what humans can do." They stepped through the doorway together. The door slid shut behind them. On the observation deck, the aliens pressed closer to the windows, many recording the event. "How long do you think they'll last?" a floating jellyfish-like alien asked Ambassador Martinez. Heather smiled confidently. "I'd start preparing for Phase 2 if I were you." In the control room, Zilthrop watched the monitors with growing astonishment. The humans were not just surviving. They were jogging across the terrain, talking and even laughing as they encountered obstacles that should have taken years to adapt to. "Impossible," the administrator whispered, but the evidence was right in front of him. The Deathworlders were just getting started. The alien observers watched in stunned silence as the humans moved through the physical endurance course. What should have taken decades, they were completing in hours. "They're not even slowing down," a tall, crystal-like alien whispered to Ambassador Martinez. "How are they adapting so quickly to the gravity shifts?" Heather smiled politely. "They're not adapting. One of our popular exercise routines on Earth involves weights much heavier than this." Inside the course, the human team faced a series of increasingly difficult challenges. The gravity increased to twice Earth normal. The temperature dropped dramatically. Strange chemical compounds filled the air. "This is supposed to take 7 years of adaptation." Alan laughed as he jogged alongside Nicole. "My grandmother's basement in Michigan was colder than this." Frank led them across a field of sharp crystal formations. According to the course guidelines, most species spent 3 years learning to navigate this section. The humans crossed it in 20 minutes. "The terrain ahead changes to high radiation," Olivia warned, checking her scanner. "This is the section that normally takes 7 years of progressive exposure." Frank nodded. "Everyone take a rad pill." He passed out small white tablets from his pocket. "You brought radiation medication?" Nicole asked, swallowing hers. "Always be prepared," Frank replied with a smile. "Standard issue for deep space training." In the control room, Administrator Zilthrop's 6 eyes widened as the monitors showed the humans entering the radiation zone without protective gear. "They'll die," the insectoid exclaimed, mandibles clicking rapidly. "We must extract them immediately." A blue-skinned alien scientist named Dr. Xilth placed a calming hand on Zilthrop's shoulder. "Wait, their vital signs are stable. They appear to have some form of internal protection." "Impossible," Zilthrop whispered. "No species can survive direct exposure." "These humans continue to defy our expectations," Dr. Xilth replied, watching the screens with growing interest. The humans moved steadily through the radiation zone. They felt warm, slightly uncomfortable, but nothing worse than a day at the beach without sunscreen. "According to this, we should be experiencing cellular breakdown by now," Olivia said, studying her scanner. "The radiation levels are significant, but nothing compared to what some of our nuclear workers handle with proper medication." As they approached the end of the zone, they found a massive wall blocking their path. It stretched up so high they couldn't see the top. The surface was smooth, offering no handholds. "The Wall of Impossibility," Nicole read from the course guide. "Most species spend 2 years developing technology to overcome it." Alan walked up to the wall and knocked on it. "It's not that thick, and the material is similar to our carbon polymers." He reached into his pack and pulled out a small device. "Good thing I brought a portable sonic disruptor." "You just happen to have that?" Frank asked with raised eyebrows. Alan grinned. "I was testing it in the lab when you called me. Never had time to put it down." He placed the device against the wall and activated it. High-frequency sound waves pulsed through the material. After 3 minutes, a section of the wall shimmered and became slightly transparent. "Now," Alan said, stepping back. Frank and Nicole ran forward and struck the weakened section with their shoulders. The wall shattered like glass. On the observation deck, the aliens gasped collectively. Some backed away from the windows in fear. Others leaned closer in fascination. They broke through the eternal barrier in minutes, the crystal alien whispered. "This is unprecedented." The human team stepped through the opening and found themselves in a large chamber. A glowing platform indicated they had completed the first phase. Physical endurance phase complete, a computer voice announced. Time elapsed. 4 hours, 17 minutes. Previous record, 36 years, 9 months. The silence that followed was absolute. Even Ambassador Martinez looked surprised by the time. In the control room, Administrator Zilthrop's mandibles clicked rapidly, the insectoid equivalent of nervous pacing. "Prepare the mental computation phase," Zilthrop finally said, "though I fear we already know the outcome." Dr. Zilth was making rapid notes on a tablet. "These humans, they're not succeeding because they're adapting to the course. They're succeeding because, Zilthrop asked. "Because the course conditions are easier than their daily life on Earth," Dr. Zilth replied softly. "We've been underestimating just how extreme their homeworld truly is." The humans entered the mental computation phase with barely a break. This chamber was different from the first. The walls glowed with soft blue light. Floating holographic symbols filled the air. 4 stations were arranged in a circle, each with an alien interface. "This phase tests your cognitive abilities," Administrator Zilthrop explained through the speakers. "Most species require decades of neural adaptation to process these equations and patterns." Frank looked at his team. "Olivia, you take theoretical problems. Alan, engineering puzzles. Nicole, pattern recognition. I'll handle strategic applications." They each stepped up to a station. The interfaces adjusted, scanning their brains and calibrating to human neural patterns. Olivia found herself facing a series of complex mathematical equations. According to the instructions, these problems typically took 10 years to solve. She examined them carefully. "These are just multi-dimensional calculus problems," she whispered to herself. "Complex, but not impossible." Her fingers moved quickly across the interface, solving equation after equation. On Earth, she had done similar work daily in her xenobiology research. At his station, Alan faced engineering challenges that would stump most alien minds for years. He smiled as he recognized principles similar to Earth physics. "Their approach is so inefficient," he muttered. "They're using 20 steps for what we can do in 5. Nicole's station displayed pattern recognition puzzles of increasing complexity. Images, sounds, and tactile sensations bombarded her senses. She was supposed to find connections that would normally take decades to perceive, but her military training had prepared her for exactly this type of analysis. Frank worked on strategic scenarios that seemed simple to his battle-trained mind. What the aliens considered complex warfare simulations were basic compared to Earth's military history. On the observation deck, the alien audience had grown. Word had spread quickly about the Deathworlders' progress. Some species had left in fear, but others had arrived in curiosity. "Look at their neural activity," Dr. Zilth said, pointing to the monitors. "It's off the charts. Their brains process information at rates we've never documented." A tall, thin alien with iridescent skin stepped forward. "I am Commander Glixnor of the Morelian Empire. I suggest we terminate this test immediately." Ambassador Martinez turned to face him. "On what grounds?" "Security concerns," Glixnor replied coldly. "These humans are clearly unnaturally adapted predators. The data we're gathering on their capabilities could pose a risk to the Confederation." Heather's diplomatic smile never wavered. "Or it could benefit the Confederation to have such capable allies." Inside the chamber, the humans worked steadily. Olivia completed her section first. "Done," she called out. The math was elegant but used an inefficient base system. Ellen finished next. "Their engineering principles ignore several fundamental laws we discovered centuries ago." Nicole completed her patterns shortly after. "Once you understand the underlying structure, the patterns are quite beautiful." Frank was the last to finish. He stepped back from his console and smiled. "Their strategy simulations assume limited resources and cautious advancement. They've never experienced Earth's military history." All 4 stations glowed green. The computer voice announced, "Mental computation phase complete. Time elapsed, 8 hours, 12 minutes. Previous record, 33 years, 4 months. The alien observers fell into shocked silence. In the control room, Administrator Zilthrop's limbs trembled. This is beyond unprecedented. It's impossible. Commander Glixner had joined them in the control room. I insist we halt this demonstration immediately. These creatures are dangerous. Dr. Xilth shook his head. We cannot stop now. The psychological resilience phase is next. That's the most concerning part, Glixner hissed. What kind of mental fortitude allows them to solve in hours what takes us decades? What horrors have they endured on their death world to develop such minds? On the observation deck, some species were now openly discussing the humans with fear. Words like predator, threat, and containment floated through the crowd. Ambassador Martinez noticed the change in atmosphere. She touched her communication device. Frank, be prepared. The mood here is shifting. They're starting to see us as a potential threat. Understood, Frank replied. One more phase to go. We'll try to look less terrifying while solving impossible puzzles. But as the team prepared to enter the final phase, even Frank felt a small twinge of concern. They had shocked the aliens more than expected. And in diplomacy, fear could be a dangerous reaction. The psychological resilience chamber was different from the previous two. It was completely white, with no visible walls or ceiling. 4 transparent pods stood in the center. This final phase must be completed individually, Administrator Zilthrop explained. Each of you will face personalized challenges designed to test your mental fortitude under extreme stress. Frank looked at his team. Whatever happens in there, remember your training. Stay focused on reality. They each stepped into a pod. The transparent doors closed. The pods hummed softly, then filled with a thin mist. The humans felt themselves drifting, losing touch with their physical bodies. Nicole found herself in a dark forest. Rain fell heavily. The trees loomed over her like giants. She was alone, cold, and lost. According to the course guidelines, this simulation was designed to create a sense of isolation that would take years to overcome. She laughed softly. During her military training, she had spent 2 weeks alone in wilderness conditions much worse than this. She began walking confidently through the forest, completely unmoved by the simulated isolation. Alan's simulation placed him in an endless white room with a complex puzzle that changed every time he tried to solve it. The purpose was to create frustration and hopelessness over decades of attempts. He sat down cross-legged and smiled. This is just like debugging code, he said to himself. He had once spent 3 straight days fixing a seemingly impossible software problem. This puzzle was nothing compared to that. Olivia faced a simulation of overwhelming sensory input. Colors, sounds, smells, and textures bombarded her from all directions. Most alien species took years to develop filters for such chaos. She closed her eyes and used meditation techniques she had learned during her research in crowded rainforests. Within minutes, she had created mental barriers against the overload. Frank's simulation was the most direct. He faced an endless series of moral dilemmas with no clear right answers, decisions that would haunt most aliens for decades. Choose who lives and who dies, the simulation voice prompted. This family or that one. This species or that one. Frank made his choices quickly but not carelessly. As a military officer, he had trained for these exact scenarios. The weight of difficult decisions was familiar to him. On the observation deck, the aliens watched the humans' brain patterns on large screens. They're not breaking down, Dr. Xilth said with amazement. Even in the most extreme scenarios, their stress levels remain manageable. Commander Glixner paced nervously. This confirms my fears. What kind of species evolves to handle such psychological pressure? Only one that lives in constant danger. Ambassador Martinez stood nearby, carefully noting which aliens seemed curious and which seemed frightened. This information would be valuable for future diplomatic relations. Inside her simulation, Nicole had already overcome 3 scenarios that should have taken decades to process. She moved through fears and challenges with practiced ease. "This final test requires you to face your deepest fear," the simulation voice told her. Nicole found herself back on Earth, in a situation similar to one she had experienced in combat. She had faced this fear before, in reality. The simulation held no power over her. In the control room, Administrator Zilthrop's mandibles clicked in distress. Their responses are unprecedented. The pattern suggests they have already experienced traumas equal to or greater than our simulations. "That's precisely what troubles me," Commander Glixnor replied. "What horrors exist on their world that make our worst simulations seem routine?" One by one, the humans completed their psychological challenges. The pods opened, and they stepped out, tired but unbroken. "Psychological resilience phase complete," the computer announced. Time elapsed: 11 hours, 36 minutes. Previous record: 31 years, 11 months. The four humans gathered in the center of the chamber. They looked tired but satisfied. "Well done, team," Frank said quietly. "I think we've made an impression." "Maybe too strong of one," Nicole replied, nodding toward the observation window where several alien species were now visibly distressed. As they exited the chamber, they found themselves facing a delegation of Confederation representatives. Some looked curious, others fearful, and a few seemed openly hostile. Administrator Zilthrop stepped forward, holding a glowing certificate. "On behalf of the Galactic Confederation, I must acknowledge your completion of the Defiance course in 35 hours and 5 minutes. There are no words for this achievement." Ambassador Martinez stepped forward to accept the certificate, but Commander Glixnor moved between them. "Before we proceed further," the commander said, "I believe the Confederation Security Council should convene immediately to discuss the implications of what we've witnessed today." An emergency meeting of the Confederation Council convened while the human team rested in a private chamber. The large circular room buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from dozens of species argued about what they had witnessed. Ambassador Martinez sat calmly at the human delegation's table, though she felt anything but calm. The council chamber was designed to intimidate, with high ceilings and seats arranged so that newcomers sat at the lowest point, looking up at the established members. High Counselor Vrex called for order. "We have witnessed something unprecedented today. The human delegation has completed the Defiance course in 35 hours, a feat that takes most species a century." Commander Glixnor stood. "This is precisely why we should consider them a threat. No natural evolution could produce such capabilities without extreme environmental pressure. Their world must be more dangerous than we initially believed." Ambassador Martinez noticed Dr. Xilth entering the chamber with a data tablet. The scientist approached her quietly. "Ambassador, I've been analyzing your planet's data more thoroughly," Dr. Xilth whispered. "The initial classification as a death world vastly understates Earth's extremity." Heather frowned. "What do you mean?" "Your planet's conditions would kill 92% of Confederation species instantly," Xilth explained. "The gravity alone would crush most. The atmospheric pressure would rupture breathing organs. The temperature variations are beyond survivable ranges for most species." Before Heather could respond, the council called her to speak. She approached the central platform. "Respected counselors," she began, "I understand our performance today has caused concern. But I assure you, humans come in peace." "How can we believe that?" a floating gas-filled alien asked. "Your species evolved on a planet so hostile that you consider our most extreme tests to be trivial. Such evolution suggests predatory capabilities." Heather thought carefully. "Consider this. Any species that evolves in harsh conditions must also develop cooperation. Our survival on Earth depends not on individual strength, but on working together. Yes, we are adaptable and resilient, but those qualities make us valuable allies, not dangerous enemies." The chamber fell quiet. Her words made sense, but fear remained visible on many alien faces. Dr. Xilth stepped forward. "Council members, May I present new data? After receiving permission, Sylph displayed a holographic comparison of Earth and standard Confederation worlds. Humans have evolved on what is possibly the most extreme inhabited planet we have discovered, Sylph explained. Their daily experiences prepare them for what we consider impossible challenges. Images appeared showing Earth's varied environments: frozen tundra, scorching deserts, deep oceans, and high mountains. What we witnessed today was not a display of aggression, Sylph continued. It was simply humans being humans. Their natural adaptability allowed them to overcome our challenges easily. In the private chamber, Frank and his team watched the proceedings on a screen. They looked tired but satisfied. We caused quite a stir, Olivia said. Frank nodded. Maybe too much of one. I hope the ambassador can smooth things over. They're afraid of us, Nicole observed. I never expected that. Alan was examining an alien device he had borrowed. It's strange to think that what's normal for us is terrifying to them. Back in the council chamber, the debate continued. Some species argued for restricting human movement in Confederation space. Others saw potential benefits in an alliance. The humans completed in hours what takes us decades, a crystal-like alien said. Imagine what we could learn from them. Or what they could do to us. Commander Glixnor countered. Finally, High Counselor Vrex raised a hand for silence. We must make a decision based on facts, not fear. The completion of the Defiance course proves the humans are exceptional, but their ambassador speaks of peace and cooperation. The galactic news networks had already spread the story across Confederation space. Trillions of beings were watching reports about the terrifying Deathworlders who had conquered the impossible. Ambassador Martinez stood firm. We do not ask for special treatment. We ask only for the chance to prove ourselves as valuable members of the galactic community. As the council deliberated, Dr. Sylph approached the human team with a curious expression. There's something I've been wondering. If our challenges were so easy for you, what exactly do humans consider difficult? Frank smiled slightly. Traffic during rush hour, small talk at parties, assembling furniture without instructions. He paused. The small things, really. Dr. Sylph blinked in confusion, then began to laugh. Perhaps there was hope for understanding after all. 3 days passed while the Confederation Council debated the human situation. The human team remained on station perplexus, becoming reluctant celebrities. Many alien species wanted to meet the Deathworlders who had shocked the galaxy. Frank and his team handled the attention with careful diplomacy. They knew every interaction was being watched and evaluated. Remember, Frank told his team over breakfast, be friendly but not too friendly. Strong but not threatening. We need to seem interesting but not dangerous. Nicole laughed. So just be perfect in every way. Basically, Frank replied with a small smile. Ambassador Martinez joined them, looking tired. She had been in continuous negotiations with various faction leaders. Good news and bad news, she said, sitting down. The council is split into 3 main groups. Some see us as valuable allies, some see us as dangerous threats, and some are simply curious about us. Which group is winning? Olivia asked. The curious ones, fortunately, Heather replied. Dr. Sylph has been very helpful. He's organized a cultural exchange program for today. Alan looked up from the alien device he was tinkering with. Cultural exchange. What will that involve? We teach them about Earth, and they teach us about the Confederation, Heather explained. It's a chance to show we're more than just physically capable. We need to demonstrate that humans are thoughtful, artistic, and peaceful. Later that day, the team gathered in a large chamber set up for the exchange. Representatives from 12 different species attended, including the now familiar Dr. Sylph and the still suspicious Commander Glixnor. Frank started by sharing images and videos of Earth, its cities, natural wonders, and diverse cultures. The aliens were fascinated by scenes of everyday human life. Your young play in gravity that would crush our bones, one jellyfish-like alien observed as they watched children on a playground. You voluntarily expose yourselves to temperature extremes for entertainment, another noted, watching footage of people swimming in the ocean and skiing down mountains. During the exchange, Dr. Xilth pulled Olivia aside. "There's something you should know," the scientist said quietly. "The Defiance course wasn't originally created as a test for new species." "What was it for?" Olivia asked. "War preparation," Xilth replied. 1,000 years ago, the Confederation faced an enemy we called the Void. The course was designed to prepare soldiers for extreme conditions. After the war ended, it became a tradition, then a membership requirement. "What happened to this enemy?" Olivia asked. "They disappeared. Some say they retreated to dark space. Others believe they evolved beyond physical form." Xilth looked nervous. Some council members fear humans resemble the Void in certain capabilities. This information troubled Olivia. But before she could ask more questions, a commotion broke out across the room. Commander Glixner was arguing loudly with Frank. "Your species claims peace while showing military capability. I find this contradictory." Frank remained calm. "Strength and peace aren't opposites, Commander. Often, strength is necessary to maintain peace." Nicole, who had been chatting with some alien military officers, noticed something strange. The air near Commander Glixner seemed to shimmer slightly. Her combat instincts immediately activated. "Frank, get down," she shouted, lunging forward. Frank dropped to the floor just as a beam of energy shot through the space where he had been standing. The beam hit the wall, leaving a smoking hole. Chaos erupted. Security officers rushed in. The human team moved with practiced precision, forming a protective circle around Ambassador Martinez. "What just happened?" Heather asked, her voice steady despite the situation. "Assassination attempt," Nicole replied. "Someone activated a concealed weapon near the commander." The Confederation security team quickly identified and contained a small device hidden in an ornamental plant. It had been programmed to target human biological signatures. Commander Glixnor looked genuinely shocked. "I had no knowledge of this," he insisted. "We believe you," Frank said calmly. "But someone wants to prevent human integration into the Confederation." Dr. Xilth approached them. "How did you detect the weapon?" "Our scanners didn't alert us." Nicole shrugged. "The air pattern changed. Slight heat distortion before discharge. Standard assassination technique where I come from." The aliens exchanged troubled glances. What kind of world produced people who could casually identify assassination attempts by subtle air movements? As security investigated the incident, High Counselor Vrex arrived. "The Council has reached a decision about humanity's status," he announced. "Though after this incident, we may need to reconsider." Ambassador Martinez stepped forward. "We just demonstrated that humans can detect threats that your systems missed. Isn't that another reason to consider us valuable allies?" The High Counselor looked thoughtful. The humans had a point, but the final decision would have to wait until the investigation was complete. 1 week after the assassination attempt, the Confederation Council finally reached their decision. The Grand Council chamber was packed with representatives from hundreds of species. The human team stood at the center, waiting to hear their fate. High Counselor Vrex rose from his seat. "After much deliberation, the Confederation has voted to accept Earth as a probationary member." A murmur ran through the crowd. Ambassador Martinez stepped forward. "We accept this honor, High Counselor. What are the terms of probation?" "Humans will be allowed limited access to Confederation space. All human vessels will carry Confederation monitors. Technology transfers will be restricted. This probation period will last 10 standard cycles," Vrex explained. Heather nodded diplomatically, but Frank could tell she was disappointed. These restrictions were more severe than expected. "We have one additional condition," Vrex continued. "The team that completed the Defiance course must serve as official representatives during this period. Their unique abilities make them valuable cultural liaisons." Frank exchanged glances with his team. This was unexpected but not unwelcome. They had grown fascinated by the galactic community. "We would be honored," Frank replied. The ceremony concluded with the signing of official documents. As the crowd dispersed, Dr. Sylph approached the humans. "You should know," Sylph said quietly. "These terms are much better than what Commander Glixnor and his faction wanted. They pushed for complete isolation of Earth." "What changed their minds?" Olivia asked. "The assassination investigation," Sylph replied. "We traced the device to a splinter group worried about Confederation security. But it was your team members' ability to detect the weapon that made the difference. Many realized that humans might see threats our systems miss." 3 months passed. The human team traveled throughout Confederation space, serving as Earth's representatives. They visited 15 different worlds and met with dozens of species. Everywhere they went, they were met with a mixture of fear, fascination, and respect. On the Confederation capital world, Frank and Nickel trained with alien security forces, teaching them to recognize threats humans could naturally detect. Alan worked with engineering teams, showing them shortcuts humans had discovered through necessity. Olivia collaborated with xenobiologists to help them better understand Earth's extreme ecosystem. Ambassador Martinez successfully negotiated to reduce some of the initial restrictions. Human merchants began trading with nearby systems. Cultural exchanges brought alien visitors to Earth, always under careful supervision. The Defiance course was permanently modified to account for human baseline capabilities. A human difficulty level was added that only 3 non-human species ever attempted. None completed it. 1 year after their first contact, the human team returned to Station Perplexus for an anniversary celebration. The station had been transformed. A permanent Earth embassy now occupied one section. Human foods were available in the dining areas. Signs included English translations. During the celebration, Frank found himself standing next to Commander Glixner, whose attitude had softened somewhat over the months. "I still find your species concerning," Glixner admitted, "but I cannot deny your usefulness. 3 separate security threats have been identified by human observers that our systems missed." Frank nodded. "That's the thing about evolving on a death world, Commander. You learn to notice dangers others might miss." Across the room, a small commotion caught their attention. A young human girl named Lisa Ramsey, daughter of one of the new human diplomats, was sitting with several alien children. She was solving a puzzle toy that the alien children found impossibly difficult. "It's easy," Lisa was saying. "You just have to think about it like this." Her small hands moved quickly, rearranging the puzzle pieces in ways the alien children had never considered. Dr. Sylph stood beside Frank, watching the scene. "That's the 3rd impossible puzzle she's solved today. The patterns should be beyond her brain development level." Frank smiled. "She's just being human, Doctor. Finding new ways to do impossible things." As the celebration continued, news arrived from Earth. Humans had established their first extrasolar colony. Human medical researchers had developed treatments for diseases that had plagued Confederation species for centuries. A joint human-alien rapid response team had been formed to handle emergencies throughout the sector. The galaxy was changing, and at the center of that change were the Deathworlders who had shocked the Confederation by doing the impossible, not just surviving, but thriving in a universe that considered their very existence a miracle. Administrator Zilthrop, now a strong advocate for human integration, raised a glass in toast. "To the humans, who showed us that our limits were only in our minds." The Defiance course is now officially renamed the Human Standard. The room filled with applause. Even Commander Glixnor reluctantly joined in.